The wind screamed through the frigid peaks of Myria, carrying a biting cold that pierced to the marrow. Kira pressed herself against a rocky ledge, her lavender skin stark against the glistening white snow. She wrapped her tattered cloak tightly around her shoulders, but it did little to stave off the chill. Tears blurred her vision as she watched the last remnants of her kin vanish into the stormy sky. They had deemed her too frail to join their journey to a new home. Now, at just 16 cycles, she was utterly alone on this merciless planet. As night descended and the temperature plummeted, Kira realized she had to find shelter or face a freezing demise. Her legs shook with cold and exhaustion as she stumbled through the accumulating snow, the wind whipping her long, silver hair across her face and obscuring her sight. Just when she thought she couldn't go any further, Kira spotted a dark opening in the mountainside, a cave. With the last ounce of her strength, she dragged herself inside and collapsed onto the rough floor. As unconsciousness claimed her, her final thought was a faint hope that at least she would die sheltered. Hours later, Kira was jolted awake by a deafening roar. The ground trembled violently beneath her as blinding light flooded the cave. Disoriented and frightened, she scrambled deeper into the shadows. The light faded, replaced by swirling smoke and the acrid scent of burning fuel. Kira could hear voices now, strange voices speaking a language she didn't understand. Curiosity overpowered her fear, and she crept forward to peek outside. What she saw made her gasp. A colossal metal vessel lay wrecked and smoldering on the mountainside, pieces scattered across the snow. Emerging from the wreckage were beings unlike any Kira had ever encountered. They walked on two legs like her people, but had skin in hues of tan and pink instead of lavender. Their ears were oddly rounded, and their eyes varied in color. Humans. Kira had heard tales of them, but never imagined she would see one. Now, an entire group was right outside her cave. She watched in fascination as they stumbled about in the snow, clearly disoriented. One, a tall man with closely cropped dark hair, seemed to lead. He barked orders at the others, pointing and gesturing. Under his direction, they began retrieving supplies and equipment from the wrecked ship. Kira knew she should remain hidden. These strangers could be dangerous. Yet, as she observed their struggle against the harsh elements, her heart ached for them. They were ill-prepared for Myria's brutal climate. Without help, they would likely freeze before morning. Taking a deep breath, Kira stepped out of the cave into the open. Instantly, all activity ceased as the humans turned to stare at her. She raised her hands in what she hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "Hello," she said hesitantly in her language. "Do you need assistance?" The dark-haired leader approached her, his hand resting on the weapon at his hip. His piercing gray eyes scrutinized her intently. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What are you doing here?" Kira swallowed nervously. "My name is Kira. I'm from Myria. This was my home planet. My people abandoned me when they evacuated." Her voice trembled on the last words. The man's stern expression softened slightly. "I'm Captain Elias Foster of the Earth ship Horizon. We've crash-landed here after being attacked by pirates. Can you tell us where we are?" Kira nodded. "This is Myria. It's an ice planet in the Andromeda Galaxy. The environment here is extremely dangerous, especially at night. You need to find shelter quickly." Captain Foster glanced back at his damaged ship and shivering crew. "Our ship is too broken to offer adequate shelter. Do you know of anywhere nearby where we could take refuge?" "The cave I was in is fairly large," Kira offered. "It should fit all of you. I can show you how to insulate it against the cold." Elias studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to trust her. Finally, he nodded. "All right, show us to your cave. But I warn you, any sign of treachery, and you'll regret it." Kira led the humans to her cave, fighting to keep her fear hidden. She knew she was taking a risk by helping them, but she couldn't abandon them to freeze. As they entered the dark cavern, Kira demonstrated how to use the bioluminescent fungi on the walls to provide light. "We need to block the entrance to keep out the wind," she explained. "There are large leaves from the glacier plants that work well as insulation. I can show you where to find them." Over the next few hours, Kira worked alongside the humans to make the cave habitable. She was impressed by their resourcefulness and teamwork. By the time night fell, they had crafted a snug shelter with separate sleeping areas and a central gathering space. As they huddled around the heating units salvaged from the ship, Captain Foster turned to Kira. "Thank you for your help. We'd likely be dead without it. Now, can you tell us more about this planet and why your people abandoned you here?" Kira's shoulders sagged. "Myria has been our home for thousands of years, but the climate has been changing rapidly. Storms are intensifying, and temperatures are dropping to lethal levels. Our scientists predicted the planet would become uninhabitable within a few years, so the decision was made to evacuate." "But they left you behind," Elias said softly. Kira blinked back tears. "I'm different, weaker than the others. A genetic anomaly. They didn't think I would survive the journey or contribute to establishing a new colony, so they left me here to die." A murmur of sympathy swept through the humans. A young woman with fiery red hair reached out and squeezed Kira's hand. "That's awful. I'm so sorry." Elias's jaw tightened. "You're welcome to stay with us. We could use your knowledge of this planet." He glanced around at his crew. "Everyone get some rest. We'll assess our situation in the morning and figure out our next move." As the humans settled in for the night, Kira curled up in a corner, her mind racing. In a single day, her entire world had shifted. She had gone from being alone and hopeless to surrounded by strange beings who seemed to accept her. For the first time since being abandoned, Kira felt a flicker of hope. The next few days fell into a routine as the humans worked to salvage what they could from their ship and establish a more permanent camp. Kira proved invaluable, showing them which local plants were edible and how to avoid the more dangerous predators. She grew particularly close to several crew members, especially Dr. Mira Chun, the ship's physician. The kind-hearted doctor took Kira under her wing, teaching her about human culture and customs. "So, you've really never left this planet?" Kira asked one day as they foraged for edible fungi. "No," Mira shook her head. "I've seen images of other worlds, but I've never been off Myria." "What's Earth like?" Myra's eyes lit up. "It's beautiful. There are vast oceans, lush forests, towering mountains, and sprawling cities. The diversity of life is incredible." She sighed. "I hope we see it again someday." "Do you think you'll be able to repair your ship?" Kira asked. Myra's expression turned somber. "Honestly, I'm not sure. The damage is extensive, and we're running low on supplies. Unless we can find a way to contact Earth for rescue." Her voice trailed off. Kira felt a pang of worry for her new friends. She had grown fond of the humans and didn't want them to suffer the same fate she had. There had to be a way to help them. That evening, as they gathered for a communal meal, Captain Foster made an announcement. "I've finished assessing the damage to our communications array. With the parts we have, there's no way to repair it enough to send a distress signal strong enough to reach Earth." A wave of dismay washed over the group, and Kira's heart ached at the despair on their faces. However, Elias continued, "If we could boost the signal somehow, we might reach the nearest outpost for help." "But how?" asked Cooper, the ship's engineer. "We don't have any equipment capable of that kind of signal boost." Kira cleared her throat nervously. All eyes turned to her. "I might know of something that could help. There's an old Myrian communications relay station in the mountains to the north. If it's still operational, it might be powerful enough to boost your signal." Elias leaned forward, intrigued. "How far is this relay station?" "About a 3-day journey on foot," Kira replied, "but the terrain is treacherous, and the weather is unpredictable. It would be dangerous." The captain was silent for a moment, considering. Finally, he nodded decisively. "It's our best option. We'll send a small team to investigate this relay station. Kira, we'll need you to guide us." "I'll go," Cooper volunteered immediately. "Me too," added Mira. "We may need medical support." "All right," said Elias. "The 4 of us will set out tomorrow at first light. The rest of you continue working on repairs here at base camp. If we're not back in 10 days, assume the worst and enact emergency protocols." As the others dispersed to prepare for the expedition, Kira felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She had never ventured this far from home before, but she was determined to help the humans who had shown her such kindness. The next morning dawned clear and cold as the small group set out. Kira led the way, her keen eyes searching for the safest path through the jagged terrain. They made good progress on the first day, covering nearly a third of the distance to the relay station. As they set up camp that night, huddled around a small heat generator, Cooper turned to Kira curiously. "So, what's the deal with you people anyway? Why did they decide to abandon their home planet?" Kira sighed, poking at the meager rations warming over the heater. "It's complicated. Myria wasn't always like this. When I was young, there were vast forests and grasslands. Millions of Myrians lived in great cities across the planet. But then the climate began to change. At first, it was subtle, slightly colder winters, more severe storms, but it accelerated rapidly. Within a few years, most of the planet was covered in ice and snow. Food became scarce as crops failed. The memories pained her, and she paused. Mira reached out and squeezed her hand encouragingly. As conditions worsened, our society began to fracture, Kira continued. There were riots and wars over dwindling resources. Finally, the decision was made to evacuate. But there weren't enough ships for everyone. Only the strongest and most genetically pure were chosen. "That's awful," Mira said softly. "To abandon your own people like that." Kira shrugged. They saw it as ensuring the survival of our species. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. "Still doesn't make it right," Cooper grumbled. "Perhaps not," Captain Foster said, "but we can't judge an entire civilization based on limited information. Right now, we need to focus on our own survival." He fixed Kira with an intent gaze. "Are you certain you can find this relay station?" Kira nodded firmly. "Yes, I studied the old maps extensively. As long as the landmarks haven't changed too much, I can get us there." "Good. Get some rest, everyone. We've got a long day ahead of us tomorrow." As Kira drifted off to sleep that night, she felt a sense of optimism for the first time in years. These humans had given her a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was determined to help them succeed. The next 2 days of travel were grueling, testing their endurance and resolve. The sun rose hesitantly on the third day, its weak light struggling to pierce the thick layer of clouds that hung like a shroud over the Myrian landscape. Kira led the group with determination, her heart pounding with both excitement and apprehension. The relay station lay just beyond the next ridge, a place of both promise and memories she had long buried. As they trekked through the icy terrain, Kira recalled the stories her grandmother had told her about the ancient communication hub. It had once been a bustling center, filled with engineers and scientists working to connect Myria with other worlds. Now, it stood abandoned and forgotten, a relic of a civilization that had turned its back on its home. "Are we close?" Cooper called out, breaking the silence that had settled over them. His breath clouded in the cold air. "Just over this ridge," Kira replied, feeling a mix of eagerness and nostalgia. The relay station should be just on the other side. As they crested the ridge, Kira's heart sank. The station loomed before them, but it was a shadow of what she had envisioned. Where once there had been gleaming towers and busy walkways, there were only crumbling walls covered in frost and the remnants of what had been a grand entrance. Vines of ice crept up the sides, as if nature was reclaiming what humanity had built. "Wow," Mira breathed, staring at the ruins. "This place looks like it's been abandoned for decades." Kira nodded, her throat tightening. "It has. After the last of the Myrians left, we never returned. It's a miracle it still stands." As they approached the entrance, the group was met with a heavy door that seemed to resist their efforts. Cooper and Elias pushed against it, straining with effort until it finally groaned open, revealing a dark interior. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of damp earth and decay. "Stay close," Elias instructed, drawing his weapon and stepping into the shadows. Kira felt a wave of fear wash over her. This place had once been filled with life, and now it felt haunted. "Is it safe?" Mira whispered, looking around warily. "It should be," Kira replied, although uncertainty gnawed at her. "But we need to find the main control room." That's where we can access the systems and see if anything is still functional. They moved deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing ominously off the metal walls. Kira's heart raced as memories flooded back. Laughing engineers, the hum of machines, the bright screens displaying messages from distant worlds. She shivered at the thought of her people's fate, abandoned in the harsh cold. "Over here!" Cooper shouted, breaking her reverie. He had spotted a flickering light down a long corridor. Kira rushed to his side, her pulse quickening with hope. The room they entered was filled with dusty control panels, their screens dim but still intact. Old wires hung like cobwebs from the ceiling, and the air buzzed with residual energy. Kira felt a surge of excitement. "Can you fix it?" Mira asked, her voice a mix of hope and doubt. "I can try," Kira replied, kneeling at one of the consoles. She brushed away layers of dust, revealing a control interface. "I used to help my grandmother repair these systems when I was younger. I remember some of it." Elias stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. "We don't have much time. If we want to boost our signal, we need to act fast." Kira pressed buttons cautiously, feeling the ancient machinery stir to life. The screens flickered, and she could almost hear the hum of energy as the systems booted up. "Come on," she muttered under her breath. "Please work." After several tense moments, the main screen lit up, displaying a map of the station and its network. Kira's heart raced as she navigated the interface, searching for the communications array. "I found it," she exclaimed, pointing at a blinking icon on the map. "It's located in the central tower. We need to get there and see if we can send a signal." Elias nodded. "Lead the way, Kira. Let's move." They followed her through the winding halls of the station, each step heavy with the weight of history. Kira couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, and she felt a chill crawl down her spine. "Does anyone else feel that?" Cooper asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Feel what?" Mira responded, shivering. "It's just cold." Kira opened her mouth to speak, but was interrupted by a loud crash from behind them. The group spun around, hearts racing. A cloud of dust filled the air, obscuring their view. "What was that?" Elias demanded, aiming his weapon into the shadows. "I don't know," Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to keep moving." They rushed forward, adrenaline propelling them through the dimly lit corridors. Finally, they reached the central tower, a towering structure that had once been the pride of Mirian technology. Kira's heart soared with a mix of hope and trepidation. "Here it is," she said, gesturing toward a massive door marked with ancient symbols. She pushed against it, and with a loud groan, it swung open. Inside, the room was filled with a maze of consoles and machinery, all coated in a thick layer of frost. The heart of the station pulsed weakly, and Kira approached the main control panel, her fingers trembling with anticipation. "Okay, I need to access the main comms array," she said, her heart racing as she began typing commands into the console. "What's our window for sending the signal?" Elias asked, glancing at his watch. "I don't know," Kira admitted, biting her lip. "If the systems are still operational, it shouldn't take long. But I need to concentrate." As she worked, the atmosphere in the room shifted. An eerie stillness settled over them, broken only by the soft whir of machinery and the tapping of her fingers on the console. Kira's pulse quickened as the interface responded to her commands, lines of code flashing across the screen. Suddenly, the room was illuminated by a bright flash, followed by an ominous hum. Kira felt a jolt of panic. "What's happening?" "Stay calm," Elias commanded, but his eyes were wide with alarm. The console flickered, and sparks flew from the control panel. "Get back!" Cooper shouted, grabbing Mira and pulling her away just as the panel exploded in a shower of sparks. Kira ducked, narrowly avoiding the debris that flew through the air. The force of the explosion knocked her back, and she hit the ground hard. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she forced herself to stand. "Is everyone okay?" she called out, scanning the room for her companions. "I think so," Mira replied, coughing as smoke filled the air. "But we need to get out of here." "No!" Kira shouted, desperate. "I can still fix it. We just need to reroute the power." Elias grabbed her arm. "We're running out of time." We need to leave now. No, Kira cried, fighting against his grip. If I can just stabilize the array, I can send a signal. As she struggled, the room shook violently, and a low rumble echoed through the station. Kira's heart raced. She could feel the station's integrity failing. I can do this, she insisted, moving back toward the console. Elias exchanged a glance with Cooper, who nodded reluctantly. Okay, but we'll cover you. Kira felt a rush of gratitude as she focused on the console, typing furiously to regain control. The screens flickered, and she could see the comms array responding to her commands. Come on, she whispered, urging the machinery to cooperate. Suddenly, the main screen displayed a message, Systems Online. Signal boost active. Yes, Kira shouted, her heart soaring. I did it. Now what? Mira shouted, urgency in her voice. How do we send the distress signal? Kira's fingers danced over the console as she navigated the ancient interface. We need to target the nearest relay. I just have to input the coordinates there. As she hit the final command, the machinery hummed to life and a bright light filled the room. Kira felt a rush of energy as the signal was sent, a wave of hope flooding through her. Did it work? Cooper asked, looking between Kira and Elias. Let's hope so, Elias replied, glancing nervously at the door. But we need to get out of here before he could finish, the ground shook violently again, and a section of the ceiling collapsed. Dust and debris filled the air, and Kira felt a rush of panic. Run! Elias shouted, grabbing Kira's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They stumbled through the crumbling corridors, their path now obscured by smoke and dust. Kira's heart raced as she sprinted behind Elias, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and adrenaline. Just as they reached the entrance, another explosion rocked the building, sending a shockwave that knocked them off their feet. Kira hit the ground hard, gasping for breath as debris fell around them. The world felt surreal, the noise and chaos melding into a cacophony that threatened to drown her. But through the haze, she heard Elias's voice, strong and steady. Get up, Kira. We need to go now. With a burst of determination, she pushed herself to her feet, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She spotted Cooper and Mira, who were already scrambling to escape the crumbling structure. Come on, Kira shouted, urging them forward. We can't stop now. They rushed outside, the bitter cold hitting them like a slap. Kira turned to look back at the relay station, now engulfed in smoke and flames. It had been their last hope, a connection to a lost world, and it was disappearing before her eyes. Is it over? Mira panted, glancing at Kira. I hope so, Kira replied, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. But we still don't know if the signal went through. Elias looked toward the horizon, where the faint glow of distant lights shimmered through the snow. We need to regroup and figure out our next move. Kira nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of what had just happened. They had fought hard to reach the station, but now they stood at the precipice of an uncertain future. As they began to make their way back toward their temporary camp, Kira felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. They had survived, and maybe, just maybe, help would come, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true challenges were only just beginning. The cold wind whipped around them as they trudged away from the smoldering ruins of the relay station, the bitter air biting at their skin. Kira's heart pounded in her chest, not just from the exertion, but from the realization of what they had done and what lay ahead. Do you think anyone received the signal? Cooper asked, breaking the silence that hung heavy between them. Kira glanced at him, her breath forming clouds in the frosty air. I don't know. It was a long shot, but it was our only option. If anyone is out there, they'll pick it up eventually. Mira shivered and wrapped her arms around herself. Eventually doesn't feel soon enough. We barely made it out alive, and now we're stranded again. Elias cast a cautious glance over his shoulder at the retreating smoke. We need to find a more permanent shelter, at least until we know what happens next. The blizzard is getting worse. Agreed, Kira replied, pushing down her worries and focusing on the immediate task at hand. There should be some caves nearby. I remember my grandmother talking about them. If we can find one, we might be safe from the elements. Lead the way, Elias said, his tone steady but the concern in his eyes evident. Kira took a deep breath, steeling herself. The way forward felt uncertain, but she pushed those fears aside. This way, she said, veering off the path they had originally followed. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the snow crunched beneath their boots, the sound echoing in the stillness. The once vibrant landscape was now a frozen wasteland, stark and devoid of life. The trees, stripped bare of their leaves, stood like skeletal sentinels against the dull gray sky. What if the signal did reach someone? Cooper mused, breaking the silence again. What do we even tell them? Kira paused for a moment, pondering the question. We tell them the truth. We're survivors, and we need help. But we also have to be careful. If there are factions or groups still at odds with each other, they might not be willing to help. Mira nodded, biting her lip. I just want to get out of this freezing hell. The group trudged onward, the cold seeping into their bones. After what felt like an eternity, Kira spotted the mouth of a cave nestled between two tall rock formations. Relief flooded through her. There, she pointed. That's our shelter. As they approached, the darkness of the cave yawned open before them. Kira hesitated at the entrance, her instincts prickling with unease. We need to be careful. We don't know what might be inside. Elias stepped forward, drawing his weapon. I'll go first. Stay close. The inside of the cave was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of earth. As they entered, Kira felt the temperature drop even further. She shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Turn on your lights, Elias instructed, and they all switched on their flashlights, the beams cutting through the darkness like knives. The cave opened into a larger chamber, where stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth. The walls glistened with moisture, and Kira could hear the distant sound of dripping water. This should work for now, Kira said, her voice echoing slightly. We'll have some protection from the storm, and it should keep us out of sight. They settled into the cave, laying down their gear in a corner. Kira's mind was racing, her thoughts flickering back to the relay station and the signal they had sent. Had anyone heard them? Would help come? Elias broke the silence as he took off his pack. We should establish a watch schedule. We can't afford to let our guard down, especially with the blizzard outside. Good idea, Kira agreed, her stomach nodding at the thought of the unknown dangers lurking in the dark. I'll take the first shift. The rest of you should get some sleep. Cooper nodded, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. I could use a few minutes of shut-eye. Me too, Mira added, rubbing her arms as if trying to ward off the chill. As they settled in for the night, Kira found herself staring into the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of the cave and the howling wind outside. Despite the exhaustion pulling at her eyelids, sleep eluded her. Her mind was too busy processing everything that had happened. She thought about her home, the life she once knew. Memories of warmth and laughter filled her mind, contrasting sharply with the harsh reality of their current situation. The Mirian way of life, once vibrant and full of hope, now felt like a distant dream. A faint sound broke through her thoughts, soft footsteps echoing in the darkness. Kira's heart raced, and she strained to listen. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by a low murmur. Her instincts kicked in, and she reached for her weapon, careful not to disturb the others. She turned the beam of her flashlight toward the sound, and the light flickered across the cave walls, revealing nothing. Kira, a voice whispered from the shadows, and she froze. It was Elias. Did you hear that? She whispered back, keeping her voice low. He nodded, his expression tense. Yeah, I think we're not alone in here. Kira's pulse quickened as she scanned the cave. What do you mean? You think there are other people? Maybe, he replied, glancing toward the entrance. But we should be cautious. It could also be wildlife. Before Kira could respond, a loud crash echoed from the depths of the cave, sending a tremor through the ground. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and Kira instinctively crouched low. Everyone wake up, she shouted, her voice cutting through the air. We have to move. Cooper and Mira scrambled to their feet, confusion etched on their faces. What's happening? Mira asked, her eyes wide. Something's in here with us. Kira explained, adrenaline coursing through her veins. We need to get to a safer spot. Elias took charge, moving toward the cave entrance. Let's go. Stay close. As they moved deeper into the cave, Kira's heart raced with fear and anticipation. The shadows shifted ominously, and every sound made her jump. They could hear the wind howling outside, a reminder of the fierce storm that raged beyond the cave's protective walls. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness ahead, and Kira's breath caught in her throat. The beam of her flashlight fell on a tall, cloaked figure standing motionless, half hidden in the shadows. "Who are you?" Elias demanded, raising his weapon. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face obscured by a hood, but Kira could make out sharp, piercing eyes that glinted in the light. "I mean you no harm," the figure said, their voice smooth but laced with an underlying tension. "I am a traveler, much like you." Kira exchanged wary glances with her companions. "What do you want?" "I've been watching you," the figure replied, stepping further into the light. "You're searching for answers, and you sent a signal. What do you know about the signal?" Kira pressed, her instincts telling her to be cautious. The figure paused, their expression unreadable. "I know that hope is a fragile thing, especially in a place like this. But I also know that you might not be alone in your fight." "What do you mean?" Cooper asked, lowering his weapon slightly, but still on edge. "There are others," the traveler said, their eyes scanning the group. "Survivors like you, scattered across the wasteland. You're not the last." Kira felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly snuffed out by doubt. "What do you want from us?" The travelers stepped closer, their gaze intense. "I want to help you find them. But first, we must ensure our safety in this cave. There are dangers lurking in the dark, and we're not alone." Kira's heart raced as she took a step back, uncertainty flooding her mind. "What dangers?" Before the traveler could answer, another crash echoed through the cave, shaking the ground once more. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Kira felt the air grow thick with tension. "We have to go now," Elias shouted, urgency in his voice. Kira nodded, glancing back at the mysterious traveler. "Lead the way, but no tricks." The traveler nodded, their eyes glinting with a strange mixture of determination and caution. "Stay close and follow me. I know the way." As they moved deeper into the cave, Kira felt a mixture of fear and hope. They were in the dark, navigating a world filled with uncertainties, but now they had a guide, someone who claimed to know about the others. The path ahead was unknown, but Kira knew one thing. They were not alone in this fight. And as the shadows closed in around them, she clung to that hope like a lifeline.